Welcome to the Decision Tree, Changing Norms to Address Gender-Based Violence and Harmful Practices explainer video. When are gender-based violence and harmful practices such as child marriage or female genital mutilation social norms? And when should programs working to end these harmful behaviors aim to change norms? This depends on the specific behavior or practice in focus and the context where it occurs. Generally speaking, a practice is typically a direct norm, when most people in a group believe most others in the group practice the behavior, and that most others expect them to practice it too. Because of these social expectations, most people in the group practice the behavior. A practice may be also held in place by indirect norms. It may be indirectly sustained by related norms, even though the norm and practice do not coincide. For instance, a shared belief that unwed girls are at risk of sexual violence can indirectly reinforce child marriage. Begin by identifying the specific behavior or practice you would like to change. For example, intimate partner violence or child marriage in emergencies. Consider what the drivers of the behavior are. This matters because not all harmful behaviors are necessarily driven by social norms in all contexts. Then, identify all of the potential drivers of the practice. In other words, the factors that cause or enable people to perpetrate the behavior in focus. Ask, are social or gender norms a major driver of this behavior or practice? What other factors might be driving it across the socio-ecological framework? This should be a broad, exploratory exercise using formative research, including a desk review and qualitative research in the settings where the practice occurs, and norm change programming is being considered. If norms are not a key driver of the practice, norm change programming may not be needed. Instead, prioritize addressing other drivers through different interventions, like law and policy reform, support services, or opportunities for education and employment. If it is clear that norms are likely to become more influential once other immediate drivers are addressed, norm change interventions could be added to programs proactively. Gender-based violence, child marriage, and female genital mutilation are complex, with multiple drivers. Even if these behaviors are not norms themselves, harmful gender norms still underpin and perpetuate them. Addressing gender and power inequalities is essential for effective change. Even if norm change is not part of a program, consider monitoring and measuring how other interventions, such as legal and policy reforms, impact the related indirect gender norms that support the practice. If indirect norms strongly influence the practice of focus, a norm change component could play a supportive role in a program to change the harmful behavior. For example, underlying gender norms, such as restrictions on girls' mobility or the lower value of girls, may limit opportunities for secondary education, which could lead to an increase in child marriage. Once you have identified whether the behavior is a direct norm, meaning that social expectations are the primary reason people practice it, or if it is supported by indirect norms, move across the decision tree to Step 3. Step 3 guides program designers in defining the overall approach to designing social and gender norm change programs. If the behavior is not a direct norm, prioritize which indirect norms to focus on, especially those that most strongly sustain the practice and carry the harshest sanctions if broken. For example, norms of family privacy or norms that discourage women from seeking help, enabling gender-based violence to continue. Formative research can help to identify this. If the behavior is a direct norm, dedicated norm change programming is likely to be effective in helping to change the practice, alongside initiatives to address other drivers across the socio-ecological framework. Conduct formative research to understand how strong the norm is, which indirect norms are most influential, who to engage, consequences for not complying or benefits for complying with the norm, outliers who act against the norm, where to conduct programming, and which other initiatives are in place that could influence results or be leveraged. These insights should be used to inform the design of the norm change program. Design the norm change intervention tailored to the specific practice and setting where programming will occur. Step 4 helps select strategies to target norms and drivers identified earlier in the decision tree. For example, if the practice and related norms are found across society, mass media approaches might work well. But if the practice only occurs within specific communities, community-based approaches will be essential. If the behavior is widely practiced where programming will occur, focus on challenging it, fostering critical reflection on norms, and promoting positive alternatives. If some influential community members or an increasing number of positive deviants do not follow the norm, publicize their stories with informed consent to model change. If sanctions are consistently enforced for those who act against the norm, for example, banning pregnant girls from school, programs could work to reduce the impact of sanctions, for instance by promoting continued education for young mothers. If sanctions are weak or inconsistently applied, programs could highlight the discrepancy to encourage others to deviate from the norm. For example, by showing examples of girls returning to school after marriage or women safely leaving violent relationships. If most people agree with and support the behavior, focus on changing individual attitudes. However, if there is pluralistic ignorance, where people mistakenly believe most others practice and approve of the behavior, raise awareness that actual compliance and support are lower than perceived. Once norm change strategies are selected, the last step of the decision tree, number 5, highlights the importance of monitoring and evaluation of norm change interventions, as well as broader programming that may influence norm change. When a behavior is a direct norm, and changing the norm is a central focus of the program, the impact of norm change programming should be measured. Monitoring and evaluation can help show how norms change, inform adjustments to programming, show what works, and contribute to the evidence base for change. This includes tracking shifts in individual attitudes, behaviors, norms, sanctions, and rewards. Other interventions focused on non-normative drivers, such as expanded access to services and opportunities, can also impact behaviors and indirect norms that support them, sometimes in unexpected ways. That's why measuring changes in norms and identifying unintended consequences is important for effective programming, even when norm change is not the primary goal of an intervention aiming to change harmful behaviors. For detailed guidance on social and gender norm diagnosis, visit the UNFPA website for Asia and the Pacific.